I'm Zara, 34, and the night I left the hospital early, I thought I was just coming home to rest in my own bed. My bag was still on my shoulder when I pushed open the door, expecting quiet. Instead, I froze at the sound of laughter coming from my dining room. My husband was at the table, smiling across from a woman I'd never seen before. And on her hand, shining under the light, was a wedding ring. I didn't shout. I didn't confront. I didn't even let them see me standing there. I lifted my phone, snapped one clear photo of the two of them eating dinner in my house, and walked right back out the door. That single picture became the first crack in the life he thought he had built. 2 weeks later, silence turned into precision. I uncovered bank transfers, hidden accounts, and a property he thought I'd never find. And when I finally laid everything down in court, the man who thought he could live two marriages lost everything: his house, his cars, his money, and the reputation he guarded most. What followed was not revenge and anger, but justice delivered in silence. And once it was over, nothing about us, or the life he tried to build, was left standing. The wheels of the taxi had barely rolled to a stop when I felt that strange weight in my chest, the kind of instinct that whispers turn back before your mind even catches up. I ignored it. I had signed myself out of the hospital a day earlier than planned, feeling strong enough to move on from white walls, antiseptic air, and the endless routine of vital checks. I wanted the comfort of my own bed, the smell of my own home. What I didn't know was that I wasn't walking back into the same house I had left behind. The front door was unlocked. My husband had always been careful, almost obsessive about securing it, but that night, it swung open with little resistance. I pushed it gently, my hospital bag slung awkwardly over my shoulder, and stepped into the familiar foyer. The first thing that struck me wasn't noise, but light. The glow from the dining room spilled across the floor, warm and golden. I paused, listening. Laughter, low, careless, and comfortable, echoed out. A man's laugh. His laugh. I moved forward slowly, my pulse beating in my ears. From the hallway, I could see the edge of the table, plates set, glasses filled. And then him, my husband, seated at the head of the table, leaning forward in easy conversation with a woman. She wasn't just some nameless figure in the shadows. She was dressed as though she belonged there, relaxed, hair styled, jewelry catching the light. And when she lifted her hand to tuck a strand of hair behind her ear, I saw it, clear as day. A wedding ring. The air caught in my throat, but no sound escaped. My body went rigid. For a moment, time stretched painfully long, each detail burning into memory. The way his face softened when he looked at her. The way she smiled like she had every right to be in my home. The way the table looked as if it had been set for two people, not three. I didn't scream. I didn't confront. Instead, I did something I never thought I'd have the clarity to do in a moment like that. Quietly, without trembling, I pulled out my phone. I framed the scene. The two of them, sitting comfortably together, his hand resting near hers on the tablecloth. One click. The sound was soft, masked by their laughter. The picture was perfect. Proof. Without waiting to be noticed, I stepped backward, careful not to let my shoes scuff against the floor. The bag on my shoulder suddenly felt heavier, my hospital discharge papers digging against my ribs. When I reached the front door again, I slipped outside, pulling it shut behind me as if I had never entered at all. That night, I didn't go back. I checked into a quiet hotel on the other side of town and lay awake in the unfamiliar bed, staring at the ceiling. My mind wasn't filled with questions of why or how long. It was sharper than that. Every second I had spent lying in that hospital bed, he had been building a second life. Every hour I had trusted him to care for our home, he had filled it with someone else. The betrayal wasn't something to cry over, it was something to dismantle piece by piece. The next morning I started. I requested copies of our joint accounts, combed through months of statements, and flagged the irregular transfers. Hotels, flights, unexplained withdrawals. Patterns I had once dismissed as work obligations now revealed their true shape. He wasn't just careless, he was calculated. Money was being moved, assets shifted. I spent the next 2 weeks in silence, living two lives. To him, I was still in the hospital recovering, unreachable most of the time. In reality, I was at the bank, in the office of an attorney, scrolling through spreadsheets until my eyes ached. I traced every dollar he had hidden, every lie disguised as a business expense. The photo on my phone stayed untouched, but it was always there, my quiet weapon. Each night, I rehearsed the scene that would inevitably come. His smugness, his arrogance, the way he would deny until cornered. And then the way he would unravel, realizing the net had been drawn too tightly to escape. When the day finally arrived, I walked into the courthouse study, a folder clutched in my hand. The courtroom buzzed with muted chatter, but all I could hear was my own breath, calm and even. He was already there, dressed sharply, shoulders squared, the same confidence that once charmed me now sitting on his face like a mask. His companion wasn't present. This battle was his alone. The judge entered, and the proceedings began. His attorney spoke first, painting him as the provider, the loyal husband. I sat quietly, expressionless, waiting. When my turn came, I stood, opened the folder, and placed the first sheet of evidence on the table. Bank statements, transfers, receipts. Then came the photo. I slid it across the surface so the judge could see clearly. My husband, at our dining table, laughing with a woman who wore a wedding band. The shift in the room was immediate. His posture faltered, his lips tightened, and for the first time in years, I saw fear flicker across his face. The judge's expression hardened as she flipped through the stack of documents. It was no longer a matter of he said, she said. It was fact. It was betrayal in numbers and ink, in images and signatures. The verdict was swift. The house, the cars, the accounts, all awarded to me. Every penny he had tried to squirrel away under different names or secret transfers was dragged back into the light. He was left with nothing but his clothes and whatever scraps of pride he could salvage from the floor. I walked out of that courthouse with my head high, the crisp air hitting my face like a promise. Behind me, his world crumbled in silence. I didn't look back. There was no need to. I had already seen enough the night I came home too early and opened the wrong door. The courthouse victory should have felt like the end, but it was only the start of a larger game. Taking the house, the cars, and the accounts was justice, yes, but justice wasn't the same as closure. I knew him. My husband had never been the kind of man to accept defeat quietly. Stripped of money and property, he would look for other ways to claw his life back. That meant I couldn't relax, not yet. The morning after the ruling, I woke in the master bedroom of the house he once called his own. The sheets smelled faintly of lavender detergent, the same scent I'd chosen months ago, but there was no trace of him left. His suits were gone, his cologne bottles missing, his desk emptied. The silence was refreshing but also fragile, as if it could be shattered by the sound of his key in the lock. I spent that first day alone, sorting through what remained. Piles of unopened mail revealed unpaid bills and overdue notices hidden from me. Behind one dresser drawer, I found a stack of receipts from hotels across different states, dates overlapping weekends he'd claimed to be traveling for work. Every slip of paper confirmed what I already knew. The secret wife had been more than a passing distraction. They had been building a routine, one layered with lies disguised as business. By the third day, whispers began circulating. Friends texted me with cautious sympathy, neighbors avoided eye contact, and even casual acquaintances seemed to know more than they should. His second life wasn't entirely hidden. Fragments of it had been bleeding through cracks for months, and now, with the trial behind us, everyone wanted to piece the story together. I ignored them. Their curiosity was shallow. What mattered was that I understood the full scope of what I had been living with. I hired a private investigator. Not out of spite, but necessity. My husband had been meticulous about appearances. If he had managed to conceal an entire marriage, what else had he buried? Bank accounts abroad, shell companies, debts under false names? I needed answers before he made a move I couldn't anticipate. The investigator, a sharp-eyed man named Douglas, agreed to keep me informed on every detail. Within a week, his findings confirmed my suspicion. There were still assets hidden beyond the court's reach. Offshore accounts, investments under aliases, a pattern of concealment stretching back years. It wasn't just betrayal, it was fraud. I stared at the reports late into the night, the pages spread across my dining table. This was no longer about divorce or betrayal, it was about exposure. The photo I had taken that night was only the surface wound. What I held now could ruin his reputation, his career, his carefully constructed image. But timing mattered. If I moved too soon, he would find a way to wriggle free, spinning lies, drawing sympathy, playing victim. I knew his skill for manipulation better than anyone. So I waited, silent again, while Douglas gathered more. During those weeks, the secret wife surfaced. I spotted her once, in a grocery store parking lot. She was younger than me, though not by much, with an air of defiance in her posture. She didn't hide her ring hand. For a moment, our eyes met across the distance. Neither of us spoke, neither of us moved closer, but something unspoken passed between us. She wasn't innocent. She had known exactly what role she played in his life, and she wore that knowledge like armor. That night, I wondered if she realized what she had signed up for. He wasn't the kind of man to protect anyone once his own survival was at risk. She would learn, the same way I had, that loyalty meant nothing to him when the walls closed in. The call came 2 weeks later. Douglas had traced one final thread, a transfer leading to a property listed under an alias. A lake house, quiet and secluded, paid for in cash years ago. He had taken her there, repeatedly, while I was left to believe he was traveling for conferences. The house was hidden from me, from the courts, from everyone. But now it was mine to expose. I drove out that weekend unannounced. The property sat at the edge of still water, surrounded by pines. From the road, it looked peaceful, ordinary, but I knew what it represented. A monument to his deception. Through the wide glass windows, I saw movement inside. 2 silhouettes, him and her, moving in easy routine, as if they were a family. I didn't step inside. I didn't knock. Instead, I raised my phone again. One picture, then another. Each frame a record of what he thought was safely hidden. After driving back to home, when I arrived, I placed the new photos beside the old one on the dining table. Proof of patterns. Proof of lies. Proof of a man who thought he was untouchable. The photographs of the lake house stayed on my table for 3 nights, untouched but impossible to ignore. They weren't just images. They were the final nails in his carefully built coffin. I had everything I needed now: bank records, transfers, secret properties, and 2 wives caught in the center of his lies. The evidence wasn't fragile anymore. It was a weapon. I knew exactly when and how to use it. His downfall needed to be public. Quiet victories wouldn't cut deep enough. He thrived on image, reputation, respect. Taking those would cut sharper than taking money or possessions. The court had already ruled once, but this was bigger than divorce. It was fraud, bigamy, and financial misconduct rolled into one. I contacted Douglas one last time and told him to prepare the full package. Every receipt, every transfer, every property deed tied to his name or alias. Then, I reached out to my attorney, who had been waiting for me to say those words. I'm ready for the next move. Within hours, legal wheels began to turn. Complaints were filed. Subpoenas drafted. This time, he wouldn't just walk into a courtroom thinking it was another round of property disputes. He would walk in and face the truth of the life he had built on lies. The hearing was set 3 weeks later. In that time, whispers spread like fire. His colleagues began to distance themselves, neighbors avoided mentioning his name, and even his so-called friends stopped defending him. Word about the second marriage leaked in fragments, enough for speculation to grow. The silence from his side confirmed more than denial ever could. On the morning of the trial, I arrived early, dressed in black, calm and steady. He came in late, wearing the same tailored arrogance as always, though his tie was crooked, his hair slightly unkempt. The secret wife was seated a few rows behind him, her face pale, her posture stiff. She looked less like a partner and more like someone dragged into a storm she couldn't escape. When the judge entered, the room fell quiet. The case began with my attorney laying out the foundation: records of concealed accounts, transactions routed through false names, and finally, the lake house hidden under an alias. Each piece was methodical, clear, impossible to refute. Then came the photographs. The first, taken the night I returned home early, the moment he thought he was safe, laughing at my dining table. The second set, from the lake house, him and his second wife moving through their sanctuary of lies. I watched the judge's face as each picture landed on her desk. Her expression hardened into something immovable. His attorney attempted to object, claiming manipulation, but the documents backed every frame. Property deeds carried his signature. Transfers bore his handwriting. Receipts matched dates of his supposed business trips. It wasn't just betrayal, it was crime. When it was his turn to speak, his confidence cracked. He tried to charm, tried to explain, but his words stumbled under the weight of evidence. The judge cut him short more than once, her patience thinning. The second wife finally stood, voice shaking, admitting she had believed his promises, believed she was the only one. But her testimony didn't soften his position, it buried it further. She confessed to knowing about the money, about the property, about the life he swore was legal. In the end, her words became another stone on his chest. The ruling was decisive. Every asset tied to his name was seized. The lake house, the offshore accounts, the hidden investments, all stripped away. He was left with nothing. Worse than nothing, charges for fraud, bigamy, and financial misconduct were referred to the district attorney. His downfall wasn't just personal anymore. It was legal, public, irreversible. I sat still as the verdict was read, hands folded in my lap, heart steady. This was what silence had built: patience, planning, precision. No outburst, no screaming match could have achieved this. Only proof. When the gavel struck, he slumped in his chair, shoulders collapsing inward. The man who once believed he could juggle 2 marriages, 2 lives, and 2 identities now faced the collapse of everything. His second wife left the room before he could even turn toward her. She didn't look back. Outside the courthouse, cameras waited. Reporters shouted questions, but I didn't answer. I walked straight through, the autumn air cool against my face. I wasn't there to explain or to relive what had already been proven. I was there to leave free. Back at the house, I stood in the doorway for the first time without dread. The silence was no longer fragile, it was mine. The furniture, the walls, the memories, they no longer belonged to him. They were pieces of my own survival, my own strength. I gathered the photographs, the dining table, the lake house, and placed them in a folder. I didn't need to look at them again. They had done their work. Proof had become justice, and justice had become closure.